Hey guys, what's going on? It's Clever Techie, and in this video we're going to be learning how to insert data into MySQL database, which has many-to-many relational tables. Okay, so this is what the basic syntax looks like for inserting, selecting, updating, and deleting data into MySQL tables. Okay, so for the insert, we have insert into keywords followed by table name. Inside the round brackets, we have columns separated by comma. Then we have a keyword called values, and inside the round brackets we have values separated by comma. And make sure to always enclose your values into single quotes when writing that code in PHP. So the value 1 is going to go inside column 1, and value 2 is going to go inside column 2, and you can have as many columns of values as you want. Next up is select, and we have select keyword followed by star if you want to select all the records from the table. We have a keyword called from, table name, keyword where, and then the column name equals value enclosed in single quotes. And you can also have as many columns as you want by adding them with and keyword, and then following that by column name equals value enclosing single quotes. Next up we have update, table name, set keyword, and whatever column you want to update, so you set the value of the column name equal to new value. Enclose that in single quotes, and you can also have as many columns as you want by separating them by comma. So you follow that by another column and another value, and then you have where keyword and column name equals value enclosed in single quotes to make sure MySQL knows which exact columns you're trying to update. Finally, we have delete from table name where column equals value. And if you omit this part here, so if you just write delete from table, it's going to delete all the records from your table. So that's basic MySQL syntax, and that's all we're going to need for this video. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be inserting data which we're going to be scraping from Internet Movie Database, imdb.com, and we're going to be inserting all the data in our database which we have created in the previous video with many-to-many relational tables in it. Now the kind of a tricky part is going to be inserting the data inside of these many-to-many tables, and the way we're going to be doing this is inserting the movie ID. As you can see, all these three tables have movies ID, and it also has director's ID, which corresponds to the main primary key of the tables which movies is linked to. So for the directors has a director's ID, stars has stars ID, and genres have genres ID. And the tricky part is knowing which movie is associated with which director, and what movie is associated with a star, and which movie associated with what genre. And for that we're going to be using a special function called MySQL insert ID, which gets the last key of the movie ID which has been inserted into the database. So that's how we're going to know which movie is associated with which ID, because we're going to be getting the movie ID which has been inserted last. Okay, so if you guys don't have this database yet, just go ahead and go to clevertechie.com and click on this article here. And I've included all the SQL source code down here, so go ahead and just copy the whole thing. And you can go to PHP MyAdmin, and under databases, go ahead and create a database called movies. Hit create, and then go to SQL tab and just paste the whole thing there and click go. And that way all the tables will be created, and if you go to my movies database, you can see that all the tables are there. So you're gonna need that, and also you're gonna need the IMDb scrape IMDb script, which we've created in the other video as well. If you don't have that, no problem, go to clevertechie.com once again and click on this article called web scraping using PHP, and I've included all the source code there. So just copy this whole source code, and I recommend that you paste this code inside a new file called scrape_imdb.php, and later on you're going to be able to include it in your other file, which we're going to be using to insert the data into MySQL database. And let me just take care of this. Okay, so first of all, I want to show you guys what we're going to be accomplishing here. So if I run the script is going to scrape all these movies here, including all the movie data, and then it's going to insert all the data here into our database. So let's wait for the script to complete, and I want to show you what's going on here. So if I go to view source now, you can see all this data is nicely formatted in an array, and that makes it really easy to start inserting data into our MySQL database. So if I go back to the database and refresh the page, now you can see all these rows showing up in all of our tables. So if I click on movies, for example, it's going to have all the movie information under all the columns, and that looks all good. So you can check out directors and genres and stars, and that's all going to be there. Now for the relational tables, you may have noticed there's more records, like there's 300 total records. That's because one movie can have many different stars. So if I click on this movie ID here on the first one, the movie is City of God, and it has 3 stars because the movie ID is still the same. So if I click on star 1, it's showing Alexander Rodriguez for the star, and it's got another star and another star name, and then it's got another star. So same thing for the genres and directors. They're all being inserted correctly, and all the movies' IDs are associated with the right director, stars, and genres. So that's what we're going to be creating here. Okay, let's go ahead and start coding now. So the first thing I want to do is include all the source code for scraping IMDb, and it's just one big function. So I'm going to go ahead and use the include keyword to include that function. And then I'm going to store everything inside data array. So I'm going to call that function and include all the parameters, which is the start year of the movie and end year of the movie, as well as the starting page and ending page. For this lesson, I'm just going to be scraping 2 pages, and I don't recommend you guys scraping a lot of pages to start with, because IMDb might not like it and they might ban your IP. So start very small when you're doing the scraping. Okay, so now we're ready to connect to the database. Connection settings. Of course, your user and password might be different, so just make sure you're entering your correct username and password. And for the database, I'm going to enter movies because that's the database we're going to be working with. Then I'm going to create the new MySQL connection by using the class name and provide all the parameters. That way it's going to connect to the movies database. Okay, so next up, remember that we have this array, and this is how the data is formatted at this time. Now let's go ahead and create a loop to loop through the whole array, and we're just going to be using a simple for loop because it's very easy to loop through the numeric array. And I'm going to use count to know when to end the loop. So count data. And now we're going to prepare our data for inserting it into our MySQL database. So for example, the description, I'm going to store the description inside a new variable called description. And since the description can have all kinds of special characters that MySQL might not like, I'm going to use a escape string function on this particular record. Also, I'm going to do the same exact thing for the title. Just going to use escape string to make sure there's no special characters inside. Otherwise, MySQL might complain about it by giving us all kinds of errors about improper SQL formatting. Okay, that's it for the escaping. Now, also, votes, which is votes looks like this, but it's a number, but we still want to make sure it's an integer. So we're gonna use an int val function on that one. And for the gross, okay, let's look at gross. So this is what the gross looks like, and it's a string because it's separated by these commas. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of these commas and then make sure we use the int val function to ensure it's in fact a number. Otherwise, the record is not going to be inserted, since the gross inside the movies is an integer. So if you go to structure here, you can check out all the data types under type, and you can see that in fact gross and votes are integers. So that's why I'm making sure they're numbers by using an int val function. So first of all, I'm going to replace those commas by using an str replace function. Okay, so I've made sure the comma is replaced and it has converted to a number. Okay, so that's it for formatting our array, and all the other values are fine, so you can leave them as they are. Now let's go ahead and write the SQL to insert all the data into our movies. So it's going to be all these records, including title, year, image URL, certificate, etc. So I'm just going to write this big insert into table and a bunch of columns, and then I'm going to use the values keyword and provide a bunch of values which are going to be enclosed in single quotes separated by commas, just like you see here. Okay, so I'm just going to store the whole SQL in an SQL variable, insert, and here I'm going to use ignore keyword because we don't want to be inserting duplicate movies in case there are any duplicates. Insert ignore into, and then our table name, movies, and then we're gonna write a bunch of column names: title, year, image URL, certificate, runtime, IMDb rating. Then I'm gonna start a new line: Metascore, description, votes, and gross. Okay, that's it for the columns. Next up is values. I'm gonna make sure it's still inside the double quotes. And then the values are of course gonna be enclosed in single quotes. So first one is the title. Next up is the year. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, you've noticed I've used the curly brackets, and that's because we're inserting the data inside double quotes, and we're using a associative array. That's called interpolation. Like, if you get rid of these curly brackets, it's not going to work. So make sure if you're inserting data in this way, you use the curly brackets. Okay, comma, and then next value, which is going to be our image. Same thing, use the curly brackets, enclose the whole thing. Next up, I have another associative array data. Certificate. Data I. Runtime. Also enclose that in curly brackets. So it's an associative array that we're running through, so make sure all that stuff is working. All of that stuff is enclosed in curly brackets. Okay, I think I messed something up here. Okay, let's just do this. Okay, so I just copied and pasted the code that I already had, so go ahead and type all of that up, and this is going to be our insert ignore insert statement into movies database. Now that we have our whole query, we're ready to execute it, and the way we execute it is by running, calling MySQL query, and then just providing the SQL inside of query as a parameter. In case it fails, we want to say die and then MySQL error. Okay, so at this point, our movies data should be inserted inside the database. So I'm gonna test this out right now. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this stuff. I'm gonna drop database movies, and I'm gonna recreate it, and then I'm gonna rerun the whole SQL script as well. I'm just gonna use Workbench and forward engineer this database to recreate the database. So I'm just gonna try. What I'm doing here is emptying out the database, so we have a clean database with all the records in it. Okay, so now we have a clean database, and we can test this out now. Okay, so let's make sure all the data is inserted. I'm just gonna terminate the script here so it doesn't run any further. Actually, no, not here. Over here. And then I'm gonna run it and see what happens. Wait until the script finishes executing. And if everything works out, we should have some movies data. Okay, so undefined index on line 18. Of course, I misspelled description because it's a long word. Refresh. Okay, hopefully it works now. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it looks like it worked. I'm gonna refresh the page here, and under movies, you can see that it in fact inserted the information about the movie. Okay, so it's working, and let's keep going. And this is how you debug your script. It's a good idea to test out your script and before you write too much code. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with a bunch of errors. Okay, so like I said earlier, in order to keep track of which movie's ID has been inserted, we're gonna use a function called MySQL insert ID. So we're gonna store this inside the movie's ID variable. Okay, so again, it's gonna get last key of. It's gonna get the key of the last movie record which has been inserted into the database. Otherwise, it will return 0. Okay, so it's gonna get the last record if the record has been inserted, right? And it's gonna get the movie ID. If the record, however, for whatever reason hasn't been inserted, like if the movie is already inside the database, it's gonna skip it and it's gonna return 0. So if that happens, if the movie already exists in a database, we just want to jump back to the beginning of the script because we don't want to do anything else after that. And the way we do this is we can just say if movie's ID is false, that means it's a duplicate movie has been detected, and we just want to write continue. And continue inside, when you use continue inside the loop, it just jumps back to the beginning of the loop and increases the counter, and it's going to jump to the next record in the array. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, you guys. And now we have all the information, all the insert data into our movies table. Next up, let's insert the data inside the directors table and stars and genres table as well. Since we already have the movies, we can easily do that by tracking which movie ID has been inserted last. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the movies data array once again, because we're going to be doing some more formatting. So I'm going to execute the script. I just want to show you guys how the director stars and genres are stored inside the array at this point. and the way they're stored is they're comma separated string values. So if I view page source here now, basically what we want to do is break those values down and put them inside of their own individual arrays, because right now the way they're stored, I don't know why it's taking so long to load. Maybe the IMDb website is lagging a little bit. Okay, anyway, so you can see under directors here, they're comma separated string values. And what we're going to do is it's taking too long to load, so I'm just going to explain it in this way. So directors equals explode, comma, and then going to provide the directors key, which is directors, stars. Going to do the same thing. Just going to copy this and replace this with stars, and replace directors with genres. So what this is going to do is it's going to just create different arrays out of the string values. So that's what explode function does, and by providing a delimiter, it knows when to separate those values. Okay, let's keep going, and let's go over the directors array using its own loop this time. So I'm going to create another loop. Insert into directors. And make sure to use another counter because we're still inside this loop here. Okay, so now that we're going through the directors loop, I'm just going to format the directors by storing inside the director array and use the escape string and trim function. Now what the trim function does is it's just gonna remove space or any other kind of blanks that will remain after using explode function, just in case. And then let's write the SQL statement to insert the records inside the directors table. So what we're doing here is we're now working with this directors table. So all we need is an ID, name. All we need is an ID and name of the director. So insert ignore into directors, name, values. Now the ID is going to be inserted automatically because inside of our database the ID is auto increment and it's a primary key. So the PHP inside PHP is going to know to insert those IDs automatically for us, so we don't have to provide it here. And then values, so all we need is the director's name, and the director's name is director. Okay, so let's go ahead and execute using the same query function, or die MySQL I error. Also, we're going to be keeping track of this director ID, which has been inserted last. So just like we did on the movies ID, we're also going to be keeping track of the last key of the director, which has been inserted. So that's what we're going to do here. Director's ID equals MySQL I insert ID, and that's going to provide the last key of the director which we have just inserted. So now that we have the last movie key, which is stored inside the movie's ID, and we have director's ID, we're now ready to insert this data inside the relational table, which is movies directors. And since we have that information, the movies is going to be associated with the right director. So that's how that's done. And that's like the gist of this whole video. So let's go ahead and write the SQL, which is going to insert these two IDs together inside the movies directors table. Okay, so if directors ID Then we want to insert movies directors. Write the SQL, insert into. This time we're not going to be using ignore because we can have all kinds of duplicate values, because a movie with the same ID can have a bunch of directors, and a director with the same ID can also have a bunch of movies. So that's why it's called a many-to-many relationship. Insert into movies directors, movies ID, directors ID, which is our columns, and then the values are going to be two of our variables, which are movies ID and directors ID. Okay, so this is our columns that we're inserting in, which are these two columns here, and the values we're getting them from the MySQL insert ID function, which is the last movie ID which has been inserted and the last director ID which has been inserted as well. I keep stressing this point because this was kind of confusing for me when I was first learning it, so I know I've repeated it multiple times, but I just want to make sure you guys get this part. Okay, let's keep going here. Okay, so there also can be a case where we already have a director. So when we're inserting our data inside the directors table, the directors are all unique. That's why we're using the ignore keyword here. So it's not going to insert unique directors. Now, when that happens, it's going to skip over and it's not going to insert the director. So the director's ID is going to be 0 because in case the last insert of MySQL fails, it's going to return 0. Insert ID will be 0 if no record has been inserted. So in that case, here's what we're going to do. We're going to find the director name, which already exists in our directors table, by using the select statement. Okay, let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so SQL equals select ID from directors where name equals director. And it's as simple as that. That's going to find the director with, that's going to return the ID with the director, and the director is the one who already exists, and it searches them by name. Then we're going to use the result, MySQL query, because we want to store the result. And then we're going to use row and fetch the result associatively, so it's returned as an associative array. And finally, we get to the director's ID, which is stored inside the row ID. So that's how we get director's ID in an alternative way in case the statement fails for inserting a director if the director already exists. Then we search for the director using the director name, and we get the ID in this way. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Finally, we're gonna reinsert the record by using exactly the same SQL. And then we're gonna execute MySQLi using the query. SQL. And that's it. So now we're inserting the data inside the movies, and we're also inserting data inside the directors, and we're inserting data inside movies directors by tracking the last ID, or if the director has been skipped, we're searching for the director and getting ID in an alternative way, where we're selecting and searching the director using the select statement. Okay guys, so for the stars and genres, it's going to be exactly the same thing. So I'm not going to be writing the code here because it's exactly the same. I have all this code here, so you can go ahead and test it out. For the stars, for example, I've just renamed it to stars, and you can see how it's doing exactly the same thing. So So if the stars is not found, like if it's skipped over the stars and stars is already existing, then we're selecting it and searching by a star name. And the same thing happens with the genres. So it's exactly the same code. I've just replaced directors with stars and genres. So you can download the source code from the description of this video, and the code is also available on the website. You can go ahead and play around with it and make sure that you get all the movies and that you get all the directors, genres, and stars. And you can also check out all the movies, genres, and all the many-to-many relationship tables to make sure all the data is correct as well. In the next video, we're going to be finally pulling the data from our awesome database, and we're finally going to be displaying the data in a nicely formatted way. So make sure to watch the next video where we're going to be doing that. And if this video has been helpful for you guys, please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Clever Techie out.